The Jared Dillian Show.
I'm Jared Dillian. This is the Jared Dillian Show. If you want to call to talk about your money, please call 844-305-7800. That's 844-305-7800. This is the Jared Dillian Show, and I am back in the radio station tonight instead of out of my house, and this pleases me greatly. It's good to be back. I have a proper microphone that's actually like pointed at my face, and I don't have cats that are meowing and trying to get into my room all the time. Actually, why don't we just start off with a call. Let's take a call. Nick from San Francisco. Nick, how you doing?
Good, Jared. Yourself?
I'm feeling good. I'm good. I actually went out to a restaurant today for lunch.
Oh, nice. Was the food good?
Yeah, it was really good. Yep.
It's been about three months for me. I got a quick question for you. A lot of talk these days about the Fed propping up the markets here in the U.S. And my question is, why can't the Japanese and the European central banks also prop their markets up? What makes us different here in the U.S.?
Well, in Japan, I will say Japan's been reasonably successful at it. When they started with Abenomics in 2012, the Nikkei was trading under 8,000, down 80% from the highs in 1990. And they did a pretty good job of propping up the stock market. I don't know where the Nikkei is right now, probably around 20,000, something like that. When they started buying ETFs, it actually had a big effect. So I'd say Japan has been semi-successful at it. Of course, the BOJ owns like a third of the stock market at this point. Europe, with the goal with monetary policy in Europe has never really been about propping up the stock market. When the ECB started buying government bonds in 2011, it wasn't. Their reaction function is just different from the Fed. It never was about the Europeans don't care about stocks. I guess what I'd like to point out is that there's a pretty big cultural difference between the U.S. and Europe and Japan, and pretty much anywhere you go in the world. Here in the U.S., we're really the only people in the world that rely on the stock market to fund people's pensions. That kind of doesn't exist anywhere else. And we have here, it's, equities, we call it the cult of equity. And we have a government, we have an administration whose stated objective is to make stocks go higher. So I just think I think there's cultural differences, monetary policy differences, but here, everything the Fed does, you can sort of frame around the S&P. I can tell you that if the S&P got back down to 2,200, the negative rates would come out. And if the S&P got below that, down to 1,800, then buying stocks would come out. So, all their whole reaction function is defined around stocks, and that's just the way it is in this country.
Got it. So I guess my question was, can we end up following, in Japan's footsteps where at some point the Fed is out of bullets? But, I guess it's a different cultural setup here as you described.
That could happen. That could happen someday. We still have some bullets left. If we started out with negative rates, we'd start out with negative 10 basis points, then 20 basis points. And, after a while, we get down to negative 75 like Switzerland. There's just a lot more tools left to deploy. I think going into this crisis, I think that people thought that the Fed would be out of bullets if something like this happened. And they didn't have a big enough imagination. Nobody ever thought that the Fed would be buying corporate bonds, let alone high yield. Nobody thought that the Fed would be buying high yield. So there's, and the other thing is that, the Fed as an institution is pretty creative about things. And I just, look, I don't know if you're one of these people that is very much against the Fed and you want to fight the Fed and stuff like that. I have no desire to fight the Fed on this stuff. If the Fed wants stocks to go higher, I'm going to play along. So and basically what they're doing is they're suppressing volatility again. I mean, if you go back to 2018, 2019, and all this discussion about how the Fed was suppressing volatility, once again, the VIX is below 30, and we're suppressing volatility.
Yeah, makes sense. Just one last comment, and I'll let you go. But so, I definitely, I buy to the belief, you can't fight the Fed, and right now, they're all in, and I'm definitely, bullish in the short term, medium term, and long term, I guess. But my, one concern is that, at some point, does it blow up, right? And that could be, 12 months from now, 10 months from now, or maybe never. And that's the one, obvious challenge in today's markets is, we all want to, be long given the Fed's so involved, but, I keep wondering that does it at some point end? And that was all.
I mean, I think part of that is sort of, look, I don't know what the stock market is discounting here. It seems like it's discounting a V recovery, like a very sharp V. And if that turns out not to be the case, if it turns out to be a longer recovery, I was reading some stuff today that's kind of suggested that we would have over 10% unemployment for the next 18 months, and that this is actually depression. So I can't predict the future. I don't, but I think that's one potential hazard is if the recovery ends up being much, much worse or slower than we anticipated, then you're living in this world where equities are basically back to where they were last year, and it just doesn't make any sense. So I don't know if that helps, but those are my thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, that was great. I appreciate your time, Jared.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for calling in. Yeah, I mean, we're just talking about this right now. We're talking about the fact that stocks are ripping and the economy is terrible, which doesn't make any sense. People are trying to figure it out. It doesn't make any sense. But let me just say once again that the economy is not the stock market, and the stock market is not the economy. And this has happened before. I mean, the stocks have confounded people in the past. I mean, during Hurricane Katrina in 2005, stocks went straight up, freaked people out. Nobody knew what to make of that. So this has happened a bunch of times in history. And the purpose of the stock market is to discount the future. The purpose of the stock market is to discount the future. Maybe, who knows, maybe the future is actually pretty good. Like I said, I went out to eat today. There were other people in the restaurant. The roads, there's traffic, there's people out. So who knows? One thing I think is going to happen is that at some point in the next month or two, these job losses are going to turn into job gains as people come back to work. And people are going to be pretty surprised by that. I'm not going to be surprised by that. People are going to be pretty surprised by that. So what if stocks keep going up? Everybody thinks that stocks are going to go down. Here's a couple scenarios here. If you went into this crisis with a portfolio that consisted of 100% stocks, then you have too high of an allocation to stocks. And you need to diversify into other stuff. Bonds, gold, real estate, whatever. If you went into this crisis with an allocation to 80% stocks, you still have too high of an allocation to stocks. And given that stocks have bounced, I would take this opportunity to diversify into other stuff. But you still need an allocation to stocks because you never know what is going to happen in the future. And what the Federal Reserve has shown here is that they are not, under any circumstances, going to let the stock market fail. I'm Jared Dillian. This is The Jared Dillian Show.
Jared Dillian. Now you know a rich guy.